welcome back to the Doll Mom Podcast. Today's episode I have been really looking forward to. I am super duper excited, a little bit nervous, but super duper excited. Today we're having on Nancy Holyoke. Nancy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course, my pleasure.
Today we're going to be getting to know Nancy, what made her want to become an author, what drew her into writing for American Girl. We're going to discuss the behind-the-scenes process of writing the books, what the process is like developing a book for American Girl, and then we're going to be discussing her legacy with the American Girl magazine and the behind-the-scenes stuff of how she was the founding author. I am super duper excited for this episode, so I feel without further ado, let's get this episode started with. So for those of you who do not know who Nancy is, she has written a ton of the American Girl Smart Girls Guides. I think her most recent one, well, not the most recent one, but like the one that's being celebrated a lot right now is the one that's about dramas, rumors, and secrets. So Nancy, what made you want to become an author?
I think being read to as a child. My dad was a big reader, and he used to read to us, my sister and me, every night before we went to bed. He was president of the local library board. So books were just a big part of growing up for me. He would read us versions of the Greek myths. He read us the Oz books. He read us Treasure Island. And then as soon as I was able to read independently, I was reading pretty much anything I could get my hands on. Anything with horses. I was big on Marguerite Henry. Anything with wolves. I was very big on Jack London. And then once Tolkien was published in the United States, I was probably in sixth grade, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then I was hooked on Tolkien. So I do think it's just the pleasure that I myself took in books.
Ooh, I love that. That sounds so cool. I love how books were kind of just all around growing up.
Mm-hmm. They were, definitely.
What first drew you into writing for American Girl?
Well, I didn't really start out writing for American Girl. I came to American Girl back when it was Pleasant Company to be an editor. I'd been working on magazines in New York and decided it was time to leave New York. And I had been working in mainstream magazines, not anything for children. So this was a different move for me to be doing editing work for children. But that is how I came to American Girl. And again, back then it was called Pleasant Company. It wasn't American Girl until after the magazine began, and then they changed the brand of the company to American Girl.
Yes, I remember the Pleasant Company days. I didn't get into American Girl. Well, Pleasant Company was a bit before my time getting into AG.
Right.
So, but I love the stuff that they had out then. And like, I have a couple of the magazines and like a couple of the Pleasant Company dolls that says Pleasant Company on the back of the neck. And I'm like, oh, such an era. I wish I was born earlier to be a part of.
Well, it was a while ago. I mean, the company was founded in 1985 by Pleasant Rowland. I'm sure you know that.
Yes.
And at the time, there were 3 characters at the very beginning. That was Samantha, Molly, and Kirsten. And then Felicity came along soon after. But that was called the American Girl Collection. And then after that, she added the New Baby Collection. And then in 1991, they added the magazine. Eventually, the American Girl brand kind of took over the Pleasant Company brand, as you know. But yes, that was the timeline, essentially.
So you said that your first project was the American Girl magazine.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about that. I know, like, we will discuss more about that in the episode later on, but kind of give me like a brief, I guess, description about what that entailed in a way.
Well, I think that up until that point, the American Girl collection, meaning the dolls and the books and the things that I imagine most of your listeners are focused on, Well, actually, maybe not. I mean, it was that the American Girl collection was historical. The concept was very much about the traditions of girlhood and growing up in America through time. But Pleasant was always interested in somehow reaching into today and addressing, as they would say, the girl of today. But they didn't know how. They were trying to figure out how to do that. And ultimately, there was a lot of debate about how to do that, because the thing that was the bread and butter for the company was the historical collection. And they decided to start a magazine. That was really how it began. And there was a lot of debate when we started the magazine about what would be in it. Would the American Girl collection, would the characters, would Samantha and Molly show up in this magazine? And if so, how would they show up? Because if we were going to try to do a magazine that included nonfiction stories and fiction and whatever all else we wanted to put in there for girls that would be relevant to girls who were growing up right at that moment, then how would we shoehorn the history in there? And so that was a debate, and it took us a number of issues to figure out what we were doing.
That's so cool. Like, oh my goodness. I love hearing like the behind the scenes stuff, which I know is like kind of maybe a touchy subject for some, because, it's like, asking, I guess, probing questions or whatever. But I just find it interesting. And like, I just, like, if I could tour like the American Girl headquarters, I so would. Like,
you could have back in the day. I don't know what the rules are now. Oh,
yeah.
sure. Yeah. Back.
Oh
well, I mean, they wouldn't have taken you through the waurhouse, but there was always a display area out in front. Like in 91, when I first arrived, they had just built this 200 square foot warehouse, and there was a warehouse where all the goods, the dolls, the accessories, the furniture, anything that the company sold would be delivered in this warehouse. And there were packers and pickers that would be processing all this stuff so it could then be turned around and shipped out. And then there were also the offices there where people worked in marketing and in sales and in editorial and, in creating all that stuff. So we were really all in one building back in that time. And there were about 260 fuller part-time people, but in the Christmas season, the sales were so high that then it would get up to 1,000. And a lot of people, it was based in Middleton, Wisconsin at that point, which is really a suburb of Madison, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That sounds like so cool. I love that. I went to Middleton, and I've been to Madison. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there used to be like this big benefit sale where all the overstock and returns would be sold at this in-person sale.
Yep.
And I've been there a couple times to the sale, and we stopped by the headquarters. And I was like, take a picture of me outside the sign, Mom. And I have it framed.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Picture frame on my desk in the office. It's so funny. But anyways.
That's very sweet.
It was really cool. And I love the town. I love the area. It's so cute.
Yeah. It's a nice place. It has a lot going for it.
Okay, kind of going back into like the writing scene, do you have any advice for listeners who want to become an author or want to write for American Girl in the future?
Well, I really can't give any advice about how to write for American Girl because I don't really know much about the company anymore. My roots are in the Madison, with the Madison people, and the Madison office has been shut down. But I guess I would say if you want to be a writer, period, I would say just read. Learn to be a good reader and learn to be a patient reader, learn to pay attention to details and how to create worlds and how to create characters. Pay attention to, read good stuff and read it with alertness and full participation. I think it's very hard for those of us these days who are always on our phones and on our screens to just sit quietly with something, but that is still what a book can do for you. And I think if you want to learn how to do that, the best thing is to read.
Nancy, what was your writing process like when you are first developing a book idea? Or like, did you came to American Girl or Pleasant Company with the idea of writing about a book for divorce, a book for dramas, rumors, and secrets? Or did they come to you about it? I guess just tell me about the whole process of it.
The first non-American Girl collection book was a little book called Help, which was really just a book version of a column that we had in the magazine. So I had been the editor of this magazine. And then I had gone freelance, meaning that I quit the day job and was open to doing projects, though, with my colleagues and friends at the company. And so they had me do the Help book. We did another one, more Help. Initially, I guess what I'm trying to say is that they were spinoffs from the magazine. And I also think that the ideas came from in-house. And that was really true over time. The ideas came from in-house. And I think the ideas came from Pleasant herself, and they came from the editors inside. And they related to, well, I think they had meetings and people threw out ideas, and certain ideas got traction, and then they would come to me. But it took a while I ended up doing what they call the Smart Girls Guides, but they too took a while to develop. I did More Help, and then I did a book called Oops, which later got repackaged as Manners. So I know that when I met you in LA, I know you had several versions of some of those books.
Yes.
But Oops is basically the first Manners book. And then came Divorce. And then after that, then they developed a format that kind of became, well, not set in stone, but a familiar format for the Smart Girls Guides, which has the vertical trim and, you know, many of the same elements. You know, it'll have quizzes and a lot of input from kids.
Mm-hmm. I always think it's cool to see how the different versions kind of changed over the years. Like I go to different garage sales, or like I'll go to this big resale sale. It's like a kids consignment sale that happens like twice a year in my town. And so I always look for the books, and like I find different versions of just different American Girl books. So to me, it's so cool to see how it changed over the years. You know, how you talked about like the vertical and like different things like that with the alignment, and like even with the illustrations too. Like,
definitely, because they did Pleasant back in the day she was not big on what they call focus groups. Focus groups is when a company is trying to figure out how well something is going to sell. And so they get a group of people together and show them stuff. Pleasant was not so big on that, but I think later on there was more interest. And so a lot of the changes in the art, I think, reflected what they were showing girls. And the art tended to get a little flatter for a while, a little more sort of not, I'm going to say South Parky, but not in content, needless to say. But, you know, that kind of hard edge sort of animated look. And then it kind of has shifted back again in recent years. But anyway, they keep revising those books because when I wrote Oops, I don't think there were cell phones. And certainly people weren't on the internet. Kids weren't on the internet. And so as time over the last 20 years, maybe longer, since we first started producing these books, a lot has changed. And so you sort of have to revise them because otherwise, you know, they aren't useful.
Yeah. That kind of brings me into my next question. What kind of research or collaboration went into writing educational books for young readers?
That's right. When you first were asking, you were asking about the process. And the process would be that they would have an idea and they would say, okay, do you want to do a book on manners? So I said, okay, yeah. And then I would go read other books about manners, books written for adults about manners, just whatever was out there. Same with divorce. Same with money. You know, same with Worry, a book I wrote with a friend. so you go and you read what you can, and you sort of get a sense of what the lay of the land is, what the consensus is among experts. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not someone who works directly with children, so I need to read those people. So I would do that. Then I would sort of establish an outline, and work with an editor and to get it all approved and plan page by page what topics you're going to hit and how you're going to hit them. We would generally have a psychologist also reading it, or some other expert in that field reading the manuscript, to get comments from that person to make sure that we were good and okay. There would be copy editors, sometimes fact checkers. There'd be a lot of other kinds of people involved.
Wow. So, oh my goodness, I love that. Okay. I remember reading that there was kind of I knew that there was some sort of collaboration happening, but I didn't really know how in depth it was, because in the back of the historical character books, there's an advisory board or something that lists all the members and helping shape the character and the books and the collection. But I wanted to ask you that because I was I wonder if this is kind of happening with the advice books and different things like that. And if so, how in depth it is. Oh my goodness, that's so cool.
Yes. I mean, it probably wasn't, it was a different sort of creature than creating Addie or really any of the historical characters. But I think that particularly with characters that come out of, very specific cultures, that you have to hear, you need those advisory boards, and you need that direction from the very beginning. With the stuff that I have done, you still need that person. It may not be quite as critical, but you certainly need a reality check. So on the money book, I have a friend who has a business degree from a fancy school, and I was getting advice from her. So we just kind of, we found our people, because you want to make sure that you aren't, that you're doing a good job.
Yeah. I love that.
Another thing I will say, now I'm going to sort of circle back, or maybe I'm jumping ahead. I don't know, but
no worries at all.
Another thing that we did with the books that was important is that, we always got reader mail from the magazines, and we would save that. I mean, we really read that. It was a big moment in the magazine when we began to get reader mail, because it showed us who our audience was, and that was great. But when it came time to do the advice books, a lot of the ideas and a lot of the process did involve reading tons of reader mail. And so I would go through hundreds upon hundreds of letters that girls had written into the magazine. And they would have already been sorted in the files a little bit, like friend issues or issues about divorce or pets. They would be sorted somewhat. And then I would go through and I'd just read masses of these letters, and I would pull the ones that, I thought I might use, or that seemed particularly powerful to me for some reason. And so we always tried to include those voices in the mix. And another thing that we did with the books is that I would go out into the schools, and I would talk to counselors in schools, and I would have sessions with kids in schools, and maybe put out not polls, but I can remember at one point I had some mimeograph thing or some copied thing that I was asking kids to write. Maybe that was when I was doing the book that is now Crushes, something about boys and girls or getting crushes. So you just try to make sure you aren't just sitting in a room by yourself. You try to make sure that you're hearing from the girls who are going through who are dealing with the issues that you're writing about, and their parents. You hear from them too. I've also had sessions with parents. So sorry to be rambling, but I guess all these people are heard from: the kids, the parents, the experts, the teachers, anyone, you want to touch base with all those people.
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of went out and did that on your own. Did Pleasant Company at the time, did they provide you with that stuff, or it was more just kind of independent?
They would hire and pay a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, a mental health professional to read a number of these things. The other things I did,
Nice. I love that. Oh my goodness.
So,
And I love how it kind of showcases ever since the beginning, the brand has always cared for the audience. You know, keeping the letters and like what people had to say in mind. I remember when I got into the magazine, I was really impressed by like them showing like the scans of the fan mail and different things like that. Like they've always kind of cared what, you know, their people who are buying their brand and are into their brand had to say, which that's one thing that I really admired about the brand.
that is definitely true. And Pleasant herself cared deeply about what people said. She took that responsibility very much to heart and instilled that in the rest of us.
Oh.
And
Getting back into the writing process of it all, how do you approach writing about serious or sensitive topics in a way that's kind of comforting and accessible to kids?
I'm not sure how to answer that one. I think you just try to take your mind, you try to pay close attention to what that kid, you try to imagine what they're feeling. If you're looking at a letter, then you're looking at that letter really hard. And you're just trying to be kind and respectful, and also real. You don't want to answer with platitudes. You want to try to answer honestly and helpfully. You know, you try to be specific. I mean, one thing that we tried to do was actually, in some instance, gives kids language to use in certain instances. You try to be specific. You try to acknowledge hurt where there's hurt and offer pragmatic suggestions.
Definitely agree that American Girl books, especially the books that you've written for the brand, definitely comes across as someone who's caring, kind of wants to be there for you, very helpful, very Pacific, and also very honest.
Well, thank you. That's what we tried to do. And we try not to be saccharine. But, you know, it's still an advice book. An advice book is never going to, you know, be like, you know, your best friend or your parents or whoever it is that you rely on the most. But it's, you know, one little thing out there in the world trying to help. Pleasant used to always talk about the favorite aunt. That was Pleasant's idea of the voice to try to strive for as a writer. The idea being that you weren't the friend, you weren't the mom, you were just like the groovy favorite aunt. Somebody who was older and wiser, but you could still talk to in a way that you couldn't talk maybe to your own parents. And so that was her take.
I'm going to now think about that every time I open up a advice book. Oh, this is my groovy aunt. What was your favorite book that you have written for American Girl?
I like the divorce book because that format, that was an outlier. It had a different trim size. By trim size, I mean that's just the shape of the book. And the format was such that I could give slightly longer answers. And I thought that felt like I could do more work with that length. And I kind of like the manners book because I started out when they asked me to do that, I was thinking, oh, you know, place settings. What are you going to do with a fish knife or the fish fork or whatever? And I was first thinking about manners in more of a social party setting, and that does exist. But of course, manners is so much more. Manners is how you treat everybody. And so it's about kindness and respect. And I liked being able to write about talking about manners in neighborhoods and talking about manners when you're traveling overseas. And essentially, manners, it means respecting differences in other people. I liked that. I ended up getting very much into manners.
If you could give one message to future or current readers, what would it be?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Just keep reading and pay attention. Give yourself over to what you're reading and go slow.
And then if you're able to tell us, are you currently working on any new projects related to American Girl or in general?
I'm not. No, I have plenty of other things I do in the world, but nothing for American Girl right now, not since the revision of the drama book. That was the last thing I did for those guys. That was actually another fun book to write. I really enjoyed my editor on that one, and we had some fun with that one too.
We are now going to be talking about the American Girl magazine. Okay, first of all, I did not know that you were a founding editor of it until you mentioned it to me in your email, and then I also did some research on my own in like a non-stalker way, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool!
Well, that's very kind of you.
In your own words, how would you describe the American Girl magazine? Maybe for someone who has no idea what it is because they don't do it anymore?
Well, American Girl magazine was, we billed it in the press releases as a celebration of girlhood yesterday and today. But it was a general interest magazine for girls who were already, I mean, it was certainly targeted at the girls who were already customers of Pleasant Company. So basically, girls from 7 to 12. It's hard to talk about magazines now because magazines are kind of dead. I mean, there's still some out there, but nowhere near the degree to what they used to be like. But there used to be tons of them, and we loved them. This one began with a section that had little short news bits and various things you could read quickly that were entertaining and newsy, or and maybe we'd have polls in that section. And then there would be two fiction stories. One that was drawn from the American Girl collection, meaning it would be one of the doll characters. And then there would be one that was not, that had nothing to do with Samantha and Molly and Felicity and Kirsten and Addie and whoever else was going at that point. And then there would be columns about cooking, like what you could make for Halloween, or costumes, or fashion, or just kinds of things that we thought kids would be interested in, nonfiction stories. And that could be about, I don't know, girls who ran rodeo, girls who did certain kinds of gymnastics. So essentially, the kind of thing that you would see in a newspaper, only geared to girls from 7 to 12. We had advice in the end. We didn't start out with advice, but we had an advice column called Help. And that turned into this whole line of advice books that followed. And it came out every other month. It was a mix of photography and illustration. That was what the magazine was. The original, the name American Girl actually was, there was an American Girl magazine that predated this one. And that American Girl magazine was put out by the Girl Scouts. But they had let their trademark lapse. A trademark is, of course, your claim to exclusive use of a name. And so we picked up that name and ended up with this whole new magazine. And it was, I don't know how many years it was around, but I think the first issue was in 92. And I think it died somewhere between 15 and, well, I guess I don't know when the last issue was.
I think it was 2016 or after.
Okay. That's kind of where I was pegging it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I loved the American Girl magazine. I so wish they still did it because I loved it. And like at one point I had a subscription to it and it was something I looked forward to getting in the mail. I know my time is a bit later than when you worked on it, but still they had the same kind of concept and stuff in it. And I loved it. It was so good.
Well, that's nice.
That's one thing they need to bring back is the American Girl magazine.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's probably not happening.
Hey, digital,
as a whole.
Something. Give it to me. I don't know.
That's very sweet.
And I even remember, like, when I first went to the American Girl store in 2009, it was my first trip, the first time I got my doll. They even had a little thing in the store where they would take your picture and they'd put it on the latest issue of the American Girl magazine.
I remember that.
And I remember, like, I still have mine, and I was like, this is so cool. It's like your own personal magazine. It's like your little magazine model. It was great. I wish, see, another thing they need to bring back. I'm telling you.
Yeah, that was a cute idea.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was Pleasant's idea. Yeah.
Oh.
But that's right. That's one of the things. I mean, we always had a girl on the cover, and then we would have a little bit of bio of her inside.
Yeah.
The idea was it was a magazine for girls just like you.
Yeah.
So,
last summer I bought a brand new in-box Pleasant Company doll. It was one of the Girl of Today's dolls, and she came with the American Girl magazine. And I had no idea that they included the magazine with the, back then the Girl of Today dolls. And I was like, this is so cool. And so I kind of have like an early edition of the magazine.
Fun.
I'm like, this is like my new favorite thing because I grew up loving the magazine, and now I get to enjoy like not really a new edition, but a new to me edition. Like, I love it.
Oh, that's very fun. Yeah, even when we were doing the magazine, Pleasant had the idea, so many of the ideas came from Pleasant herself, of doing a mini mag. So there was a page in the magazine that was printed front to back with pages from that same magazine. And the idea was you could cut it out and stack those pages. And by the time you turned them around and stacked them and put a staple in, you had, you only had like 8 sides because, of course, you couldn't do the whole magazine, however long that was. But it was the idea was it was a mini magazine that then you could show your doll.
Yeah.
So that they were just working that idea both ways. And then once the Girl of Today came out, I remember now that you say that. I had forgotten. But yeah, very fun idea, very cute idea.
Yeah, I have a couple of the mini mags from my time that they included them. And it was so cute. I just love them. I love it when they come out with stuff that's for you and the dolls, I love a matching moment, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Being the founding editor, what did your role entail? I know we kind of got into it a little bit.
I mean, an editor's role is basically controlling or influencing everything that you look at for a magazine. So that means everything, all the visual and editorial content. But, you have to hire staff and manage staff, contracts, budget, editing, writing, all that stuff. In this situation, Pleasant was really the ultimate editor. I mean, she was the ultimate authority on everything. I think because I was the first editor, there were a million decisions to make about what this magazine was going to be. I mean, how long was it going to be? How often was it going to come out? The base of the company was the historical characters. So would they be in there? How would they be in there? How much would they be in there? Or should we have other kinds of history in there? And how would that work? And so all those decisions, kind of have to get tussled to earth. And it took us a while to figure it out. I mean, the early issues were not great looking. We had trouble figuring out what we were doing. We ended up hiring a great art director out of Chicago who helped us a lot. And we had a lot of talented staff who helped. And eventually we kind of got the format right. It probably took a year and a half while we would try things. Then if that didn't work, we'd quit doing that and we'd do something and we go, oh man, that didn't work, or that did work. All of that was part of it. So that was my gig. And also I was the primary, did most of the communicating with Pleasant. I always had a particular affection for the fiction. So I kept editing the fiction even after I left the company. Even as a freelancer, there was a few years there where I was still editing some of the fiction.
What did a typical day look like working on the magazine?
Gosh, I'm not sure there was a typical day. At any given time, you have to be planning, you have to be working on the issue that is going to be out in 2 weeks. At the same time, you're thinking about the next issue and the issue after that and the issue after that. There certainly, when it comes to things that were seasonal, you had to pay attention to that. If you wanted to shoot a photograph Like if you wanted to do a piece on girl skiers, let's say, you had to shoot it in the winter. So you couldn't decide to do that. You had to take those photographs in the winter. That issue of the magazine might be closing. You might be going to press with that issue in, I don't know, I'm just making it up, like September. So you couldn't shoot it then. So you had to shoot it the year before. So I guess what I'm saying is there would be some things that are involved with what they call closing a magazine, meaning the final stuff that you do right before it goes to press. And then there's other stuff you do when you're deciding what's going to be in that magazine 6 months from now, and who's going to be responsible for what, and where the photographs are going to come from, or the art, who are the artists you're going to get. How do you someone's got to go find those artists. Working on various fronts all the time. But we didn't have any particular schedule for meetings or anything that I could recall. So for anyone who likes sort of rolling chaos, it's a great field to get into.
Constantly working ahead, it sounds like, and looking ahead.
Yep, that's the plan. Yep, that's what you had to do.
Nice. Thinking back about the one that I have, I know you said that there was like different formatting stuff. The one that I have looks great. It's a later 90s issue, but it looks great.
Yeah, well, it would be. Later 90s would be fine.
I'm going to have to hunt down an early one.
Yeah, well, yeah.
What was your...
Even I don't think I have one.
Really?
No, I think I pitched them. That's terrible.
You're like, nope, don't want to relive these days.
Yeah, it's kind of true. But anyway, they were okay. We were just figuring it out.
Yeah. Everybody has to start from somewhere and figure stuff out.
That's right.
I mean, I think back to like my podcast, first couple episodes, don't listen to them,
Well, that's how you learn.
Exactly. It's how you grow. Yeah.
Exactly.
What was your favorite thing about the magazine?
Oh, the paper doll. I just think that was, I think the paper doll was just a brilliant idea, and it was beautifully executed. The idea for the paper doll, every issue had a paper doll, and it would be stapled into the center fold. It was on heavier stock paper. It wasn't on the same paper as the rest of the magazine. It was cardstock is what you call it. And we would take a girl of today, a reader. It was really the perfect fit for the magazine. The idea is you take a girl of today, and then you'd interview her about her mom and her grandmom and her great-grandmom. You had to have a family that knew something about the family history. And essentially you would then you would have an artist illustrate it. The doll itself would be an illustrator's version of a little girl of today somewhere in the U.S. that we would find. And then there would be with her like 7 outfits. And one outfit would be like that little girl's favorite dress. And the next would be her mom's favorite dress. And the next would be her grandma's, and then her great grandma's. And then you could skip way back to, I don't know when, the middle of the last century, or even further, depending on how it was worded. And then on the back of all these things, the little girl and her dress and all those other dresses, all these things were punch outable, so that you could put these clothes, illustration of the girl you could punch out, and then you could punch out all of the clothes, and it's a paper doll, so you could put these clothes on that doll. But on the back of those clothes, there would be a little bit of text that told about the history of the grandma or the great grandma, where that person lived, and why this particular kind of clothing was important. So, and it was just a really fun, cool idea, because it gave you the same kind of information that you would get in the looking backs in the books, in the American Girl collection books. It was a great way to treat history, and also it was just visually fun. And the woman who wrote that, most of it was a woman named Harriet Brown. She did a great job. I mean, it was well researched. The illustrator did a good job. It was just cool.
Yeah.
And I like the fiction. I always like the fiction. That's my own particular bent.
Okay, I have really enjoyed our conversation in our episode today. Nancy, you are so sweet and so kind. Thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, I enjoyed it too. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome back anytime that you want to come on. This was so much fun, and I always get really sad when it's the end, but you know what? It's okay, because I'm super duper excited to edit this and to post this and for everybody to listen to it and enjoy our conversation just as much as I do. So y'all, you need to go read, go check out your local library. It might even have a digital version of the book. I'm not really sure, but you definitely need to go purchase the 10th edition of A Smart Girl's Guide, Drama, Rumors, and Secrets. It is great. I have read it. I highly recommend it. Okay, it is great, just like all of other Nancy's books that she's written for the Smart Girl's Guide and for the magazine that she edited. I really hope this episode inspired you to pick up a book with your dolls, pick up the magazine. I hope it encourages you to kind of focus into reading and to focus on discovering new worlds and, kind of just be inspired to do stuff with your dolls along the way too. My name's Mal. I am at Dollies and Rainbows on social media, but you should definitely go check out my Doll Mom podcast, social media stuff, the podcast that you're listening to right now. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok at Doll Mom Podcast. I really appreciate it if you guys went and gave me a like, give me some little bit of love, just like you're going to give the love of the 10th edition of A Smart Girl's Guide, Drama, Rumors, and Secrets. Alrighty, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. Thank you so much again, Nancy, for coming on, and I hope everybody has a great day until I talk to you next. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening.